Good morning. Welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Social Media Manager for HAR. I'm joined this morning electronically, of course, by Daniel Gonzalez with TAR. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for joining us on this Monday morning. This is our Monday motivation, as you said, right before we got started, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, Daniel, if you could just start out, if you could just introduce yourself to our members that are watching.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Daniel Gonzalez, and I work for the Texas Association of Realtors, now known as Texas Realtors. So we dropped the association in our name just recently. I've had the privilege of being with your organization since August of 2000, so that's been a long time. I currently am the Director of Legislative Affairs and Chief Lobbyist for the organization. And my main duties are to basically be nice to folks. You know, we have to have relationships with all 181 members of the Texas legislature. And we also help our partners up in Washington, D.C. And we usually go to Washington 2 times a year to help lobby our congressional delegation, as well. So I've been really privileged to be part of a business organization for that long. And I just thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for taking the time. I know this is a busy time of year for you, of course, to say the least, right?
No, it is. But today is a good day because it is MLK Day, Martin Luther King Day, and the
Yes.
House and Senate are both out. So they are taking this holiday, but they'll be right back at it tomorrow.
All right. Well, we'll just get right into it. I have a question about TREC to start us off. So could you tell us a little bit about the sunset review process for TREC?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So a lot of people may know this and some may not, but the Real Estate Commission was under sunset review last year during the interim between the last legislative session and this legislative session. And what that means is that there's a state agency called the Sunset Advisory Commission, and they are tasked with reviewing agencies all across the state of Texas every 12 years. Now, the Real Estate Commission, the last time they were up for sunset review was 12 years ago. So it was their time again to be reviewed. What the Sunset Advisory Commission does, what they do is they do an in-depth analysis of the agency to make sure that they are doing their duty, to make sure that they are protecting consumers and there's no waste, fraud, or abuse, if you will, within the agency. The Sunset Advisory Commission makes sure that each agency is a well-run agency. The Real Estate Commission did go through that process last year. They began that process probably early in 2018, and ultimately it culminated into a report being made public October 1st. And then November was a hearing to look at all of the details of that report. And then December, just last month, there was a final hearing of the Sunset Advisory Commission to adopt the final recommendations of the Sunset Commission report.
Okay. So what is the plan legislatively to ensure that TREC continues to operate, for consumers?
Sure. So right now, there will be a bill that is being filed, or it's actually being written right now, hasn't been filed yet. And that will probably happen over the next probably 2 to 4 weeks. We will finally get a bill and get it filed. Let me back up a little bit and just make sure that people understand, the significance of this whole process.
Okay.
If a bill does not pass through the legislature, that agency will cease to exist. Now, the Sunset Advisory Commission also had the ability to make a recommendation to kill off or to ensure that an agency does not continue to exist. They certainly have that ability to make those recommendations. That did not happen in this case, and we're thankful for that because the Sunset Commission really saw the benefit that the Real Estate Commission has out there in Texas, not only for all of our real estate licensees and realtors across Texas, but also for all consumers in Texas as well. So they have that ability. If the bill does not get passed this session in 2019, the Real Estate Commission will cease to exist. Now, we do not see that. We don't anticipate that happening, but you never know what's going to happen during a legislative process or a session. So that may happen, but we don't really think that will happen. But now is the time where the Sunset Advisory Commission, now that they have made all of their final recommendations on all 31, 32 agencies that they were reviewing in 2018. Now is the time that they're writing a bill to take those recommendations and put them into a legislative format, into a legislative bill. We don't know at this point who will file those bills from the Senate or the House side, but we do know that sunset bills historically are carried by Sunset Advisory Commission members. So if they were a member, like, for example, Senator Birdwell is chairman of the Sunset Commission, he may or may not be one of those individuals who carries the bill. On the House side, we have Representative Chris Patty, who is the vice chair of the Sunset Commission, and he will also carry bills. But they both work together, and they divvy up each of these 31, 32 bills to all the members of the Sunset Commission. Thankfully for us, we have a great relationship with all of the members of the Sunset Commission. So no matter who carries it, Republican or Democrat, we're going to be just fine. A couple of things that I wanted to mention about the sunset recommendations before we move off of them, just so everyone understands what was in the report. We worked very closely with the Sunset Commission to ensure that one of the recommendations that was being made by the commission staff, the Sunset Commission staff, we wanted to make sure that, I'll tell you about the recommendation. Sunset staff had recommended that the part of the law that allows the Real Estate Commission to be self-directed, semi-independent, which means that they do not go through the appropriations process. They are fully funded by your fees, the license fees that you pay to the Real Estate Commission. So the Sunset staff had recommended that particular part of law would cease to exist in the Occupations Code, where the Real Estate Commission is created, and move that to another part of the law. We didn't really agree with that recommendation, so we worked with the Sunset staff and the Sunset Commission members to ensure that what we currently have relating to the Real Estate Commission stays put. However, there's some additional recommendation of reporting requirements that the Real Estate Commission will have to do that was approved by the Sunset Commission members, and we did approve all of those. We actually support those requirements. For example, some of those additional reporting requirements will require the Real Estate Commission to have some enhanced reporting requirements to the legislature to ensure that they're meeting their stated goals. That was not really clear under the current law, and we believe with this report and with these enhanced recommendations, reporting requirements, that actually will be better overall, not only for the Real Estate Commission, but also for the legislature to ensure that they're meeting their stated goals.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody wanted to read more of those, where could they find them?
Sure. So that if we don't have it on our website, we will shortly, but you can go to our website, texasrealestate.com, and you can go to our Legislative Affairs tab, or you can also go to the Sunset Commission agency website and read it there. But go to our website, texasrealestate.com, and you'll be able to see that report there. But it is a public report.
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that to us. So I wanted to get into, actually, somebody put this on my desk a couple weeks ago, which, if you can't read it, it's the legislative priorities for the 86th Texas legislature. I'm sure you've seen this. But this was part of why we were like, okay, we need Daniel to come speak to our members, because when you open this up, there is a long list of legislative priorities that we have. And we can tell people where they can get more information about them, but I wanted to pick out a few of them for you to explain to our members, or maybe just help us better understand, what these priorities are. So starting with tax reform, can you tell us a little bit about tax reform and how it feeds into school finance?
Oh my gosh, I hope we have, for the next 2 hours, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
I'm kidding for everyone who's watching. We're not going to be here 2 hours. Yeah, no, that is going to be a big issue, this time around. We did include it in our priorities booklet because historically we as an organization, we have and continue to care about public education. We understand the importance of public education and how it impacts the real estate market all across Texas. And we also look at property tax reform and property taxes because we know that is one of the if not that, we usually have heard that the number one question that our members hear from their customers and clients are, the first question is, how are the schools in this area? The second question is, what are the property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So those two really do go hand in hand. So we have made those a priority, and they are in our booklet. And you can find that booklet again on our website, texasrealestate.com, I believe, /issues. But go to our website, texasrealestate.com, to look at that booklet. The other thing, the good news is this, that both the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker, as of right now, they are all talking the same language, meaning everyone wants to put more money into public education, and they also want to pass property tax reform this session. The good news also is that the House and Senate just last week came out with their proposed budgets for the next 2 years. So that'll be for fiscal year 2021.
Okay.
The good news is that both the House and Senate are putting more money into public education. Mm-hmm. Now, put a big asterisk, though, on that statement, because while we know that the initial plan is to put more money into public education, we don't know any of the details as of yet. But that's okay, because it's still early. We still have another 125 days to go. Mm-hmm. But the good news is that the top three leaders in both chambers of the legislature are talking about school finance, public education, as well as property taxes. So over the next 5 months, we will be working with the House and the Senate, as well as the governor's office, to ensure that whatever gets passed is going to be good, not only for our public school kids all across Texas, which, by the way, we have 5.4 million kids in our K through 12 system. Also good, that's going to be good for them, good for teachers and educators, mm-hmm. as well as good for property owners across Texas. Now, many of you may have heard last session that there were a couple of bills just on the property tax reform side that got really, really close to the end, to the goal line, if you will, but nothing really did pass, and that's why this time around more focus has been put on property tax reform and school finance. But you mentioned it just a little while ago. Mm-hmm. These two items indeed are tied together. So when you're talking about school finance reform and you're talking about property tax reform, those are interrelated. And the reason why is because the state of Texas shares the cost with local taxpayers, the cost of public education. Just recently, or over the past few years, we have steadily seen the percentage of state funding decrease. The overall number of total dollars has increased, but from a percentage standpoint, from a state perspective, their skin in the game, if you will, has decreased to about 60-40. 60% of the money coming from local property taxpayers, 40% coming from the state with some federal funds in there as well. I'm a lobbyist, so I can say ish. So it's about 60-40-ish around there is the breakdown. If they don't do anything this session, that percentage will continue to shrink. Recapture payments will continue to increase, and more local tax dollars will not stay at the local level, but be spread out across Texas to ensure that there's equity in the system. Again, stay tuned. We have a long way to go, but the good news is that all top three leaders want to do something, and I believe they mean what they say when they want to get something done before the end of session.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, like you said, although we don't know the details, it's good to hear that it is a priority. And of course, we'll stay on top of that and be listening for what you have to say about that.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. So something else that I think would definitely affect our members, a proposed flood risk bill. So Senator Joan Huffman's proposed a bill about flood risk disclosure. Can you tell us how that differs from what is already required to be disclosed?
Sure. So there have been a number of bills, not necessarily filed. I think the Senator Huffman bill is one of the first ones to be filed.
Okay.
We've been working very closely with a few other members who are in and around the Houston area who were impacted by Harvey. Mm-hmm. We certainly understand, what all of these members are trying to do, which ultimately they're trying to ensure that people better understand what they are getting into when they purchase a home. And if you listen to a lot of the stories from the Harvey storm, a lot of people didn't understand exactly where their property was situated. They didn't understand that they may have been wholly contained within a reservoir, or that they're in a flooded area. Mm-hmm. What the seller disclosure form attempts to do, which, by the way, that was that was a form that was your association all the way back in the early 90s. We pushed the legislature to pass that bill to ensure that the buyers of real property had a better understanding of the condition of the property that they were looking to buy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's your organization who actually was at the forefront of passing the seller disclosure law, way back in the early 90s. Historically, what that law has been about was looking at the condition of the property and looking at the past condition or past events of that property.
Mm-hmm.
What some of these bills are that we are seeing this session really attempt to do is to expand the seller disclosure form to include potential future events, which, based on our very limited legislative research on this bill and others, it really would be the first time that we are looking at some future events potentially for a particular home. Now, seller disclosure has been modified over decades since it was originally passed by the legislature. But if you look at it, it's meant to give the buyer of real estate a better indication of the condition of that property.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is this, that typically, for the most part, the seller disclosure is filled out by the seller, not by the realtor. So in terms of liability, typically, as you know, the realtor will give a seller disclosure form to the seller if they're the listing agent and say, fill this out.
Right.
And then that has to be disclosed to the buyer, very quickly early on in the process.
Mm-hmm.
We will continue to not only work with Senator Huffman, but the legislature, generally speaking, on all these bills, because we all want the same thing. We want to make sure that people fully understand what they're getting into before they buy a piece of property. But we also want to make sure that they're getting good information. And what I mean by that is the seller disclosure notice does give a seller the ability to basically check, I don't know. It could be yes, no, or I don't know. The more information that you put in the seller disclosure form that the seller may or may not have a true understanding of on how to answer that question, they're going to answer it just by saying, I don't know.
Right.
For example, under some of the bills that we have seen, they're asking in the seller disclosure, is your property potentially subject to flooding in a catastrophic event? Well, the answer could be yes or could be no.
Mm-hmm.
What is the definition of catastrophic event? And at that point, I mean, are we talking about an asteroid hitting the Earth? I don't know, but the devil is in the details and on how the terminology is actually going to be used.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, I tell you all of this because we want to make sure that sellers, whenever they fill out this seller disclosure form, just don't check, I don't know, because then that doesn't give the buyer any useful additional information.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So obviously, I showed the book earlier, a lot of stuff that you guys are keeping on top of, a lot of different issues. What can we do locally to stay more engaged with these issues? Because I have a feeling that for some of our members, this is the first time they're hearing about some of this stuff. So what can we do locally to stay more engaged?
Sure, no, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for showing the book. Please, again, go to our website, texasrealestate.com for a electronic copy of our legislative priorities booklet. The first thing, that our members can do is make sure they read the book. These priority issues, some are new, some aren't. We've updated the booklet a little bit, but a lot of these issues should be familiar to many of our members. But another way to keep involved is to sign up for our legislative liaison email. So we send that out during a legislative session. We send out a legislative liaison email every single Friday, every week. And what we attempt to do with that email is to keep you up to date and informed of that week's actions that the legislature has done. So if you aren't currently receiving the legislative liaison email newsletter, please again go to our website, texasrealestate.com, and you can sign up for that legislative liaison newsletter.
Okay.
We always get some great feedback whenever we do send it out. A lot of questions are asked by our members, and we will answer every single one of those questions as well. But you can certainly do that. And then finally, make sure you put on your calendar March 26th. That is Realtor Day at the Capitol. We do it every 2 years. Last time when we had Realtor Day at the Capitol, we had 2,500 realtors all across the great state of Texas who descended upon their state capitol and talked to legislators about our priority issues for that session. We're going to do it again on March 26th at Realtor Day at the Capitol. Make sure you put it on your calendar, and we hope to see you here.
I mean, I've attended Realtor Day in the past, so I can definitely attest to it. But can you just tell us how much of an impact does that make when realtors show up at the Capitol to those representatives and senators?
Oh my gosh, it's huge, and the reason I say that is because you pay me to talk to these legislators every single day, while you are doing your due diligence with your customers and clients every single day. You don't have time to see what's happening every day at the legislature. That's where we come in. That's where I come in. That's where your government affairs team comes in Austin. So that's what we're doing. But it's huge when you make the effort to come down to Austin, because they see our faces every single day. And while they're in a legislative session, they really have very little time that they spend back in the district. The weekends they will spend back, in the district, but then during the week they're up here talking and talking not only with leaders, legislative leaders, but also their cohorts in the House and Senate. Mm-hmm. But when you come up from the district and you as a constituent are there in your meeting talking to these state reps and state senators, it's huge, because you are making the trip on your own dime. They understand that, and they will make every effort to hear you. But they hear us, and they know when we talk, we are representing 125,000 members all across the state. But when you come up and you make your voice heard, and collectively we have 2,500 or 3,000 members show up, it's just huge. And no one in the Capitol, I promise you, there's no way that they don't know that it's Realtor Day at the Capitol, because you can't get into the lunch line. You can't, it's hard to navigate through the halls of the Capitol, because there are over 2,500 to 3,000 members there. I want you to be part of that, and come see it March 26th, Realtor Day at the Capitol.
Great, thank you. And HAR, we will have buses going from different locations all around Houston, so be on the lookout for that, any HAR members that are watching. So I know we do have some questions that have come in from our viewers, Great. So I just want to take a look and see if there's anything that we can help them with there. So Nancy Rawlings asked, or she just said, she would love for you to address the high-speed rail since it was listed.
Yeah, so high-speed rail, that is one project that will, it looks like it's moving forward. Texas Central is the private company that has proposed to build a line from Houston to Dallas, not necessarily going parallel to I-45, but very, very close to it. That is a project that Texas Central has said they will not accept any public money, so no tax dollars will be used for that project. I believe in Houston they've already said where the station is going to be, and help me here, it's an abandoned mall near 290 and 610, and I can't remember the name of the mall, but that's where the station is going to be, and then they've already said where the station is going to be in Dallas. It's our understanding about 50 to 55% of all the parcels of land that they'll have to use for this project have already been bought without using eminent domain proceedings. So that thing could be, hopefully the project will break ground either this year or next year, and in a few years get this thing up and running.
Yeah, that would be great. So Lois has a question about flood insurance. She said, is flood insurance going to be continued? I've heard it may not be continued. And then when is the next legislative session that will address flood insurance?
Sure. So flood insurance is a national program. So there's a national flood insurance program, NFIP. We've been working very closely with our national counterparts in Washington, D.C. at the National Association of Realtors to ensure that the flood program does continue to exist. We don't believe it's going to go anywhere. It's not going to go away. Certainly the Congress over probably the past 2 or 3 years have just made some temporary adjustments in terms of when the program will cease to exist. We are hoping that a long-term solution will be discussed by this Congress this year to ensure that the flood program is continued for another 5 years, at least another 5 years in the future, if not longer than that. Okay. Some of the problems or some of the issues that Congress would like to address is the financial stability of the program. The percentage of properties that have more than 2 or 3 claims over a 5-year period, it really is staggering. So what Congress is trying to do is to look at the program, see if there's some modifications to the program that can ensure the long-term financial stability of the program. Our national folks at NAR will continue to be working on it, and we'll continue to work with them to ensure that this program continues to exist, not only for people in the U.S., but specifically people here in Texas.
Okay. Lois actually did have another question too. How will the current Texas legislation affect our property taxes in Houston? And then she said, particularly as related to areas hit by Hurricane Harvey flooding.
Sure. So 2 things. I'll answer that question 2 ways. First is there is a movement among a few members of the legislature to look at disaster appraisals or reappraisals, if you will. So Harvey's a great example that was a storm that hit after appraisal values had already come out, and after many of them were finalized. Under current law, a local taxing entity, a city, a county as an example, after disaster has been declared in an area, a local entity can choose to vote among themselves to ask the Central Appraisal District to do a disaster reappraisal, meaning that if your storm came in like Harvey and you no longer have a home, but you have the slab that's there, but there's no home, that's not worth $300,000. So under current law, a local entity can vote to allow a disaster reappraisal. The problem is with that current law is many of these local jurisdictions choose not to do a disaster reappraisal because of the tax hit or the tax revenue hit that they will receive by doing so. This session, there's at least 1 or 2 bills and a constitutional amendment that would essentially redo how disaster appraisals are done, and essentially, instead of allowing a city or a county to choose to vote to do a disaster reappraisal, it will be an automatic appraisal based on that property and based on your level of destruction. So it could be a 20%, 40%, 60 or 80% or 100% destruction of your property, whatever that percentage is, that you'll pay your tax liability will be on the percentage that continues to be there. In terms of the other part of the question about how the property tax reform legislation could impact you personally, we don't know yet. A lot of the transparency measures that were talked about last session hopefully will make their same way. They're back to a bill this session, because what we have found is a lot of people don't even understand the property tax system. They don't understand that it's a 2-part system. You have the appraisal process and then you have the tax rate setting process. A lot of people don't understand a lot of the things that get put into the newspaper, a lot of the forms that are out there that attempt to give people more information. It's just very convoluted. Mm-hmm. So last session, there are a lot of transparency measures to allow just an average taxpayer to better understand the system. We think that will be at the forefront again this session. And if those pass, we think that will ultimately give people better knowledge on the property tax system so they can then understand how to protest not only their appraisal, but also get involved in the tax rate setting process as well. Stay tuned, though, because we will see exactly what kind of tax reform we're talking about and whether or not that may means more money in your pocket towards the end of session.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. So Nancy said that she emailed you, and we'll actually put up your contact information just a little bit. She said she emailed you about the light or the rail. So we'll be on the lookout for that email from her.
Sure. Absolutely.
David is asking, is there anything new on the docket regarding business incentives to relocate to Texas?
Yeah, so there is. So current law in the tax code, there are 2 different chapters that allow entities to lure other businesses from other states here to Texas. It's under Chapter 312 and Chapter 313 in the tax code. Chapter 312 incentives, those are some incentives that are allowed for local entities like cities and counties to do. That currently, if the legislature does not take any action this session, that incentive program will cease to exist, I believe, on August 31st of this year. It is something that the legislature absolutely they do know. A lot of folks are pushing for this program to continue to exist. And as an organization, we see the benefit of having these types of incentive programs in Texas to allow more companies to relocate here to Texas. So that will be on the docket. You will definitely see the legislature debate that issue. And again, moving forward, we will certainly let the legislature know that we do support the continuation of that incentive program.
Great, absolutely. All right, so that looks like all the questions we have from our members. Is there anything else you wanted to share with the members that are watching?
Well, again, thank you very much for the invitation. I just want to remind folks, March 26th, put in your calendar, be on the lookout for more information from HAR on how to get here. Mm-hmm. Also, please, if you do not receive the Legislative Liaison newsletter, please sign up on our website, and you can find it at texasrealestate.com. And finally, if you have not read our priorities booklet, please look at it. If you have any questions, let us know. We're here for you. We work just like you, 8 days a week, 24 hours a day. Okay, great. And we will put up your contact information in the comments. So anybody that's wanting to reach out to you directly on any other issues that they may have on their mind, they can reach out to you. Sounds great. Thank you. All right. Thank you again. And thank you to our members that are watching. Hope everybody has a great Monday and a happy Martin Luther King Day. If anybody's going out to the parades, hopefully you stay warm. And we'll see you guys back next Monday at 9 a.m. Bye-bye.